Sure. Thank you, Kim. Welcome everyone to today's session around lessons learned in 2020 around cybersecurity. Before we get started, Kim, why don't you go over some of the logistics around participation in this webinar?
Absolutely. So earlier, when you guys signed up, we had asked you questions, and we want to make this event kind of different from your average webinar. So we encourage you to use the tools available on the WebEx platform. If you look to your bottom right, you can chat, you can use the Q&A function, you can react with emojis or tell us we're going too fast or too slow. We really love your input, and we will be looking for feedback, or if you guys have requiring follow up to the questions you submitted. We really just want to make this event as beneficial to our guests as possible. So I encourage you to use all these functions, and somebody will be monitoring them throughout the presentation.
Awesome. I just want to make sure my audio is correct. You can hear me, right? Perfectly well, huh?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, yeah, just wanted to make sure my other mic wasn't engaged. All right, so we can get started. So today's presentation will loosely follow this agenda that you see here. I'll highlight some of the lessons learned, some of the things we saw this year during this pandemic related to cybersecurity, some of the key, I want to say, um, security trends or things that should not have happened or we should have been more prepared with. I'll go over those real quick. But the bulk of this is mostly taking Q&A. We've received plenty of questions during the sign up of this event, and I'm going to be tackling through most, if not all of those. And then we'll end off with looking forward, looking ahead at 2021. What can we do better there based on some of the findings and lessons that we learned this year? So let's start off with who am I? Some of you may know me. For those who don't, I'm Mindsight's cybersecurity practice lead and the virtual CISO. My qualifications include, a CCIE, social engineer, certified ethical hacker. I've been on the technical side and consulting side for all of my career. I also do open source intelligence and privacy consulting on the side. It kind of feeds back into the consultancy. I've had plenty of years of experience, multinational experience, consulting with all sorts of firms, small to large, government to education in this space. And to be honest, all of them have similar concerns. They're just packaged differently. So some of the key lessons I highlighted that we learned from a cybersecurity perspective this year is we noticed that our approach to solving problems like hacks or systems that had crashed or malware breaches, stuff like that, were very reactionary in nature. And our exposure was really high. Not just the exposure to the virus, but our personal information and the associated risk itself. Some of the risks that I've seen during this consultancy period is that we were unprepared for the amount of remote workforce that was introduced. With that came new challenges, not just from an infrastructure standpoint, IT infrastructure, but that had a direct impact on how quickly we could secure our remote workforce. We saw the rise of new types of scams being introduced. A lot of them were unemployment-based scams, benefits, and we saw how vulnerable and weak the unemployment benefit system was. They could not deal with sending out checks in a timely fashion, securing the process, the online verification systems. All of those had systemic flaws in place. VPN load. We had customers coming to us asking us to deploy better VPN solutions because previously, a very small subset, 20, 30 people required access out of, a couple of hundred. Now most of the workforce was remote. So 100% required VPN access. The systems couldn't take that load. The firewalls were not sized accordingly. So those are new issues that were suddenly introduced from an IT infrastructure and security perspective. Systems, again, did not scale, mobility issues, redundancy issues, uptime. One of the big things I saw was BYOD, the bring your own device policies. A lot of customers did not have these for decades because people worked, out of the offices using corporate resources. But now scrambling for resources, remote resources, contractors, all those type of things, BYOD suddenly became a very, a prominent topic, and everyone wanted some sort of flexibility in work, what devices they use, personal, corporate, public devices, and then things like encryption became a hot topic, and endpoint protection. We've had so many discussions around endpoint protections this year, and so many new vendors have popped up, so many new options have come about because of this, cloud security, all those things. But in general, the exposure to our vulnerabilities has been increased by a lot simply because we were unprepared. And there's a lot of that unmanaged security concern. By what I mean by that is, security systems were in place. A lot of people had invested a lot in security, but no one was keeping an eye on them. So systems were in place. I dealt with some breaches where when we did information gathering, there were logs in place, there were SIMs and SOCs in place in some cases, but nobody was keeping an eye. Nobody noticed a breach had happened. Nobody was saving those logs. Nobody was correlating those to phishing and other things. Training platforms I saw in place because of investments previously, but they weren't being utilized properly. So a lot of it was just an issue of managing the existing security infrastructure that was there. Some of the other issues that were pretty obvious was stuff like this. We had not come across this term prior to 2020, Zoom bombing. And this was largely due to an oversight on the security SDLC practices, so the software-defined life cycles, the encryption on platforms like this, the process controls, something that's highlighted in all cybersecurity frameworks like the CIS-20 or the NIST. They all tell you how to secure your software properly, your infrastructure. But in defense to some of these platforms, the product was simply not ready for mass rollout, and especially not for business. This ended up with a lot of government bans on institutions using this. Some of the pertinent threats here, just Google the term Zoom bombing. It's unfortunate, but that's what we're calling it now. Whether it's Zoom, whether it's any other platform that people are exploiting for this, but this is the reality of the situation. All sorts of insecurities were found in platforms like this. People started abusing it, logins, lack of authentication, and what ended up happening was the FBI, gave stern warnings against using platforms like this, and it ended up in bans. Some countries banned the platform. Companies like Google, Tesla, NASA, all these large companies, they banned it from internal usage. So you don't want to be in a position where your company, your software, your product is not ready for something like this, and then suddenly you start seeing bans or regulations to a software platform such as Zoom. I mean, in all fairness, they've fixed it now, but can you really fix that loss of reputation For example, the term Zoom bombing will now live on for generations to come, whether it's done on Zoom or WebEx or whatever, but that term is now sticky. We saw new scams coming out. Scammers are always looking for opportunities. This was, you know, another opportunity for them, whether it's a pandemic, a tragedy, anything, they'll take advantage of this. Social engineering scams, phone calls, email phishing scams were on the rise. Anything to do with exploiting the emotions that coronavirus had basically instilled upon the world. So, these were anything from robocalls. I've heard offers for testing kits, vaccine research, an increase in the phishing emails, exploiting all of these different alibis, donation schemes. I see that every time there's a big tragedy, an accident, or anything that happens, donations for that cause. So this is just more opportunity for scammers to basically magnify their efforts. This also highlights another weakness in the process, something we don't pay much attention to in security. These are process controls. Some of these things we don't consider security controls because there's no firewall protecting an unemployment scam or a check that's mailed to the wrong person or a phone call that's done in the guise of social engineering. But these are all security risks and concerns that there are solutions towards. Some of the other things that these type of hacks caused was loss of reputation. Like, social media played a big role in stuff like this, like the hack of Jeff Bezos' phone with malicious software in it. This caused reputational damage, things that you can't really measure with metrics and stuff. In fact, Jeff Bezos actually associates this hack with his divorce. He says, after he had that divorce, his pictures were leaked from his personal WhatsApp account, which caused an FBI investigation into this entire case and revealed something much bigger. So social media had a big role to play this year in spreading news, information, misinformation, vulnerabilities, hacks, all of that. It just caused more damage to what was already going south. But with that, let's take attendee questions. We had a bunch of questions come in through the sign up, and let's tackle some of those one by one. So the first question I have here talks about security threats. So the question is, what were the biggest security threats this year specifically? I have a short list here of the things that I personally saw with some of the engagements. Stuff like phishing emails. They have always been number one on the list. They've always been a security threat, but this year that campaign, those phishing campaigns just went higher and higher. And it's the lack of proper email filters that I saw was a very basic threat. Most companies still don't have basic email filters in place, let alone internal phishing campaigns. So that I feel is an easy one that can be resolved. Other stuff is very close to awareness. When people don't realize what these scams look like, what hackers are doing, they fall prey to social engineering attacks. So awareness is the only way you can prevent attacks like that. I call it the human firewall. We're trying to create a human firewall here, and that only happens with training and awareness. A lack of planning was another big security threat. When you're not ready for disaster and it strikes, it hits you hard. So damage control. I mean, we start with damage control, and that comes with security controls. And I saw very few security controls in place, but I saw a lot of people talk about it, yet not take a lot of action. Cloud security, I see that a problem year after year. To this date, people don't take it seriously. At the end of the day, that's just someone else's computer. It's still your problem. Uh, Mobile security is something newer, and I tie that into IoT security because both of these platforms are becoming more and more important as more people use mobile devices, as more IoT devices get introduced in organizations, the attack vectors are increasing rapidly. And we see this with all sorts of phone hacks, IoT-based malware that's out there, ransomware on the OT side of things as well, which is factories and process controls. So those are some of the bigger threats. I know again, this is not something unique to this year. It's these are the same threats we see year after year, but these are some of the threats that have, in my opinion, increased more than the rest of them. The next question is around forensics. Any thoughts on providing a series which covers the forensics end of malicious software like ransomware toolkits, emotets, etc.? My short answer to that is, the internet is being flooded with online conferences right now. There's all these cons out there, B-sides, DEF CON. There's so many security researchers there presenting on topics about, they're dissecting malware. They go very deep into forensics, digital forensics. Our strategies are more around our consultative side of things. Our strengths are in providing a holistic approach in this space, but we are open to the potential of having technical deep dives by having guest speakers who are experts in malware analysis. If we generate enough demand, yeah, we'll do it. But for right now, we don't have plans on going too deep into topics like this. But again, we're open for this. This question was a handful, but we're going to cover it because it's a great question. A lot of new technologies here around SaaS, cloud, privacy in general. So how far do you feel organizations should go to protect SaaS applications and cloud data? We cannot take for granted the hosting companies are doing all in their power to secure our data. You're right about that. Should we be mandating access to our cloud data from services like Microsoft or Salesforce, etc., so we can have copies of our data that they may lose due to encryption and/or destruction? So let's take that first question and dissect this a little bit better. So for Salesforce, for example, yes, you should ask for copies of your data. So I'm sharing my screen here. If you just Google, search Salesforce, Salesforce request a copy of your data, or Amazon, or Google Cloud, they will all have links and procedures on how to export your data from their systems. And due to a lot of new privacy laws and stuff and regulations introduced, you are allowed to have entire copies of everything they own about you, including statistics and analytics data that may not be data that you have given to them in the form of customer data, but all the other data, metadata, is also available to download. So yes, you should periodically download this data, back it up yourself in case their systems go down, and we've seen that happen every now and then, especially with smaller companies. Or if you decide to switch over to other systems, no one can hold your data hostage or against you. You should always have a copy of your data regardless. So yeah, it's best practice. Have a policy around it on how often you want to do that, and yes, be in charge of it. The other side of this is security. Are they doing everything in their power to protect your data? I would say probably not. They're in the business of making money. So protecting SaaS or cloud applications is your responsibility. I say the best solution to this is create a SaaS security checklist. Here's a checklist that I found online, which is quite thorough. It goes over every single piece of a SaaS application, from non-technical controls, from the employee side to technical controls like coding. There should be a secure development lifecycle practice around the coding. You should vet out your SaaS providers. And if you feel that they're not meeting standards like this checklist over here, they're not, if they've never had an audit done, that's a red flag right there. Why not? If they've never had vulnerability testing or pen testing done and they're not willing to provide you with that data, then they're fishy. Move on to the next one. So this usually happens in the beginning when you're vetting someone out like this, but this is the bake-off that I always encourage. You have multiple options on the table. Yeah, see how serious they are about security, because some organizations will be serious about it, some will take their privacy policy very seriously, others will not. So they all have their own infrastructure, their own ulterior objectives. See who owns the company, where your data is being stored, are there compliance issues, PII, are they taking care of those things? So there's a lot to consider here, but I say, start the process. We are always here to help out in this vetting process. We have our own partners that do some of these things. We have our own consultancy practice that will vet out either in-house software, SaaS-based solutions. We'll have an opinion. So I encourage you to reach out to our solution architect team. We have cloud-based solution architects as well, myself on the cybersecurity side, and we can at least help you, point you in the right direction. The other part of this question was browser isolation. How do you feel about browser isolation tools? I feel pretty good. Now, so what are browser isolation tools? There's a nice article about browser isolation. It's basically browsing on another platform and isolating your hardware, your operating system, from the browser itself. So to give you a simple example, if I browse something right now, this is Firefox, and if there's a malware that's specific for Firefox, or let's say Chrome or whatever, and I accidentally download that, not only will that malware infect the browser, but from the browser, it'll then go to my operating system, reach my CPU, my kernel, whatever, and its purpose will be to destroy the system that's running behind it. But what if this browser is not hosted on my machine and it's on someone else's machine? So let's say the example of a virtual machine, I log in and I browse somewhere else. There are solutions to this, and this is quite a good way for air gapping your browsing with your actual system. So a quick and dirty solution to this for testing, and I use this for opening fishy links, or if I know that there's malware in a link and I need to analyze it, I go to this free tool here. Well, they give you a few minutes for free. It's called browserling.com. And if I enter here, let's say, let me enter a website here, which shows me my IP address and stuff. And I can choose what browser I want to open it under. Let's say, let's keep the defaults Windows 7, Internet Explorer, test now. It's opening up that link in a newly created browser. It's spinning up a browser session right now on a cloud platform, so it's not on my machine. So if there's any malware here, it's going to infect that other virtual machine that's running in the background and not my machine. So it's opening this link up, and it says, my IP address seems to be in Michigan here. I'm running Windows and stuff, and Mozilla. So none of that is true, because this is not my machine. It's running on someone else's machine. So that's browser isolation. This technology is becoming more and more popular right now, especially for remote workers, where if you're clicking on a lot of links and you need complete isolation with your system, yeah, this is the solution to go with. And there are plenty of options out there, SaaS-based solutions out there. I encourage you to explore those options, and let's have a discussion around that. Next part of this is, are the security vendors keeping up with the needs of all these off-premise solution providers? mainly pertaining to zero-day threats. Um, yes and no, depends on which vendor you're talking about. So some of them, take it pretty seriously and have cloud-based security in place. Others are just, you know, doing business as they see the demand. They're adding new options to this and stuff. So zero-day threats is a tricky one because these are threats that don't exist today, threats that we don't know about. So how do you protect against those? Well, a solution is one above it. Browser isolation is one solution. So if you don't know about a threat and your browser seems to get infected with malware, someone else's browser gets screwed up and you can always respawn that session and you're good to go. Desktop as a service is another solution for mitigating threats like this that also isolates you from your systems. So there are solutions and vendors are offering those things, but are all of them keeping up with these? No, especially because of COVID and how things have quickly increased in terms of remote work and cloud applications. Most providers are just spinning up applications, providing services without really securing them at first. Case in point, Zoom before that. Zoom is now end-to-end encrypted with an option, but when they first came out, they weren't. They just wanted adoption. They got lots of adoption, but they secured their systems after the adoption phase. So most of them, I say, are following that trend. How do you see the future of password usage evolving? Yeah, passwords are a very old technology. I take an approach which is kind of different, and I feel this is the right way that it should be done. So I use something called a hardware token, a YubiKey. This is the exact YubiKey that's in my laptop right now on the USB-C port. This is how, I'll demo it right now, how I can log in or how I should be able to log in without a password. So here's a demo website that demos this technology, the WebAuth technology. So let me register an account first. First step is I register an account called admin, and this little pop-up comes up. It says basically touch the YubiKey that's in my computer. Let me touch it. I touched it, it recognized it, that's it. Now, if I need to log in, now I press login, and it asks me for this prompt again. Let me touch the YubiKey, touched it, and I'm logged in. Don't believe me? Let's try again. I did not need a password in this. All I needed was a unique name, so a username. So let me try that again. My username was admin. I click on login, asking me to touch that YubiKey. Let me reach out, touch it, and that's it. I've logged in. This is the future of passwordless logins and authentication. Now, a YubiKey is something that you have. So something you know is your username, but others know it too. Password was that second factor. But a YubiKey is more secure because that's something you physically possess. You cannot make a copy of this, so you should have a backup of this. But this is one way that logins are becoming easier. In the interim, I would say use a multi-factor authentication approach. This is part of multi-factor, what I demonstrated right now. But in the interim, since we have passwords and we're not getting rid of them anytime soon, have stuff like password managers. I always say this to people, I have 70, 80 character long passwords for everything. I don't remember my passwords. My password manager remembers my passwords, which is Bitwarden, if anyone's interested. But there's LastPass, Bitwarden, there's a whole bunch of other password managers. Stop remembering passwords. Last time I checked, I did a password audit on my Bitwarden. I had 600 passwords. I don't remember those. Those are all randomly generated. I only need to remember one password, which is the master password to unlock Bitwarden. From then on, it auto-populates, and then as a third factor, so after the username, password, I have a YubiKey that protects those accounts, and I just touch on the YubiKey and I've logged in. So my login process is very quick. A question just came up in the chat, Dashlane. Yeah, Dashlane is also a good option. There's built-in password managers, like if you're in the Apple ecosystem, you have the iCloud keychain, but then that doesn't work on Windows. Windows has their own password manager. Browsers have their own password managers like Chrome and Firefox and others. So pick a password manager that most suits your needs. For me, it was more about being open source, being available on multiple platforms. So I chose Bitwarden because it's audited, it's open source. They don't charge a lot per user either. It's cross-platform, and it has the option to be offline as well as cloud-based. So if I go paranoid with my security one day and I don't want Bitwarden to be communicating online like LastPass, Dashlane, and the others, I can always take it offline and host it myself. Because there are other options like KeePass. A lot of privacy enthusiasts will mention KeePass XC, which is completely offline. You store it, you host it yourself in a local database. So there's options anywhere from easy to difficult, or paranoid. I say any password manager at this point is better than no password manager. So start with something. I started off with iCloud keychain. Then I realized, hey, if I'm on a Windows system, I can't use this. Then I went to LastPass because it was the most popular one, most deployed one out there and easy to use. Then I became more privacy conscious. I just migrated all of that data to Bitwarden, and it worked out. There was no struggles or hurdles in the path. So have that process, then eventually come to hardware-based tokens, because that is the future of passwordless authentication. Read about the FIDO2 framework. That's what it's all about. Moving on to the next question. This was around what automated or AI tools do you recommend for securing cloud deployments? And when will Mindsight offer expert level support for AWS environments? So to answer the first question, so I reached out to our cloud team, cloud and data center team. So Mike Cerniak leads that, and he can definitely have a detailed discussion around this. But we recommend Cloud Checker as that AI and automation tool for the cloud. You can look up their website. So we partner with them so we can provide advice and rollouts related to this. There are definitely other platforms out there as well, but this is our recommendation. Regarding AWS environments, so we at Mindsight partnered with another technology firm in Chicagoland area solely for the purposes of AWS migrations. While we continue to develop our own in-house skill sets, we have a couple of people trained on the Microsoft side, but for rollouts like this, we will rely on our partner network. And again, there's so much to do in this space, in cybersecurity, in cloud, that no one company or organization can do it all. And this is why we have this model of being that central point of that trusted advisor role, and we have multiple partners in place to fill in the remainder of the gaps. So that's our approach for AWS at the moment. Next question is around, has cloud been targeted more as a whole than individual companies? I always say there's no cloud, it's just someone else's computer. But the weakest link is always targeted. Whether it's cloud or whether it's on-prem, hackers don't care about those intricacies. They care about the weakest link. So to expand on this a little bit more, let's take the example of Microsoft Exchange. So email servers on-prem versus cloud-based email like Office 365 or Google and stuff, which are targeted more. Well, initially, I would say when everyone was on-prem, the cloud services were targeted more because people did not secure them well enough. It was new, they didn't know how to do it, it was plug and play, it just worked. And so the cloud services were targeted better because they had more reach. Anyone from anywhere in the world could reach those services. But now I see a different shift. Every time I do a security audit, a pen test, or phishing attack on a system which involves emails on-prem, the on-prem solution is always weaker. This is just in my testing and all the phishing pen testing that I've done. It's because the updates are so frequent right now that people are still on 2012 Windows Server 2012 for on-prem Exchange, and even when they go up to 2016, there's 2019, there's updates, there are patches, there are versions. People are not keeping up with these things. It's too much headache, it's too much maintenance, and then all the little security stuff in between, the SPF records, DKIM records, all that stuff. You need an expertise in this to really secure stuff on-prem. In the cloud, it's a mix there. So some cloud services are doing a terrible job at this because they just want to sell services, but others are doing an amazing job. Like Microsoft security is pretty good right now. I mean, I'm a Microsoft hater, but from their cloud security perspective, yeah, if you're hosting it on Office 365, for a phishing attack to go through, one of those easy ones, they're going to block most of those things. And on-prem, you have to actively struggle to patch your systems in order to block the simplest of things. So again, what's targeted more? It doesn't really matter. I don't think there's one answer to this. It depends on the cloud service itself and how secure it is. Next question is around user awareness. We've adjusted our goals this year to focus on significantly increasing user awareness efforts. What pivots have other security leaders made from their planned strategies for the year in order to focus on enabling employees? And what were the terms to allow for more risk, extent, duration, etc., while enabling employees to work from home? So this is a great question because I touched upon it as part of some of the things I've noticed this year as weaknesses, that security awareness needs to be in place. Sadly, not many have taken serious actions in adopting these strategies. There's the entire security program that needs to be implemented. It's not just about having video on demand or a few other strategies in place. This is a holistic approach in educating not only internal staff, but users, everyday users, on how to defend against common attacks and common threats. With this, I do have a slide on this. Let's see. I have a sample. Oh, budgets is the other thing. I don't see a lot of budgets being created for this. So my advice, create a budget for security awareness training because this is your first line of defense. Here's a sample phishing program. People come to me a lot and say, let's do phishing attacks because it exposes some of the vulnerabilities. Yes, good. That's a phishing pen test. It's a point-in-time assessment where I'm assessing the vulnerability of your employees today on this week or whatever, and that's about it. But I say have a security awareness program which includes a phishing program, and this is what a phishing program would look like. It includes education, like video on demand. First, educate the employees. Half of them will not pay attention. That's fine. This is why you do it in smaller chunks and frequently. You have quarterly social engineering campaigns to continuously test and build metrics. And that includes part of it is phishing and a mix of baseline phishing, set that baseline, start with easy ones, go up one level, intermediary ones, and then go all out with spear phishing, targeted attacks, and then see if your efforts are fruitful in protecting your employees. And then mix a little bit of phishing, voice-based phishing, because that's pretty common nowadays as well. And see how that works, and then go back and fine tune what you found from this. It's not just, yay, we've done a phishing campaign, these are the results. Okay, now do something about it. Otherwise, what a waste of time, money, resources. Internal reports have metrics in place. What are you trying to achieve? I see a lot of misconceptions here when I do phishing campaigns, and people see, oh, so many people clicked. Okay, so what? I've clicked on phishing emails, and I can guarantee you everyone will click on a malicious link at some point in their life. That's not what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to see the other metrics. Okay, they clicked. Did they report or not to their IT? If they didn't report, there's one of two problems. Either they're afraid of repercussions, or they didn't recognize it. So they need, awareness training. That's a problem in itself. That problem we can solve. But if it's a matter of repercussions, they feel that they're gonna have some internal repercussions for reporting an email that I fell for it, I submitted my credentials, then that's an internal issue, a policy issue, an HR issue that you need to resolve internally. And we're here to give advice on how that goes around. So there should be that metrics analysis as part of all of this so that you improve upon it. And then user debriefing emails should be positive in terms of the messaging. It should have lessons learned. There should be no element of blame or embarrassment on people who clicked, because this is a problem. People don't learn when they're embarrassed. It should be a learning opportunity. I say, have gift cards, reward employees who are more aware, and this will encourage everyone else to be part of that system. My suggestions here are everyone who reports a phishing email, one of the internal ones, give them a $25 gift card or whatever. People who enable MFA, we enforce MFA, but when you enforce something, it doesn't have an impact. When you give them some rewards for doing stuff they should already be doing, like multi-factor authentication, they do it wholeheartedly, and they do it happily, and they don't complain about it later. So reward them for this. And these rewards are meaningless to a company, but they mean a lot in adoption of a technology. What is $25 per employee, even if you do it, times 1,000? The risk that you're averting from insecure employees is worth much more than hundreds and thousands of dollars. So I see this as nothing pocket change for companies. So this is my strategy. I feel this works versus just doing simple pen tests and just looking at metrics and then not taking action on it. Next question is around these gray area companies. How do you deal with those gray area companies exploiting the fear, jacking up pricing, phishing attacks, etc.? I'm glad someone asked this, because I've dealt with companies like this who prey on companies using breached databases, and then they show these companies, hey, look, this is what's online. I can see your passwords. I can see stuff. Mind you, I do that as well. I do it in very controlled environments. I do it when I'm presenting to an organization, when I'm invited to present the security practice. I show them these are some of the vulnerabilities that are out. The sessions are not recorded. There's no fear tactics. There's no sales tactics involved in it. It's just awareness. But then there are these other gray area companies that do the exact opposite. They have threatening tones. They're sending mass emails to everyone using credential surfing from the darknet and stuff. That's unethical. That's completely unethical. So fight the FUD. That's my advice. Fear, uncertainty, doubt. They prey on FUD. They prey on the lack of education that comes with this. It's easy to get that information. Do the research on your own company. When companies like this approach you, even us, we always say, do a POC. Yeah, if you say, hey, this email security stuff or this multi-factor authentication app is going to protect you from XYZ, all right, prove it. Do a proof of concept, implement it, do a small demo, whatever. If it works, if it passes the test, yeah, we're in. If it doesn't, and if it's just sales marketing fluff, then I don't want it. If it's just a buzzword that just sounds nice, then forget about it. So that's my approach to this. Call it out. Um, First things first, know your problem. If they're exposing something that you already know and you know it's not a threat, then it's not a problem. But how do you know it's a problem? You do an assessment. Do a self assessment or hire us to do a security risk assessment, and we'll tell you what we see as risks based on standards, CIS 20 standards, NIST standards, PCI standards, whatever. We'll use those to assess and prioritize your risks. Now that you know what your risks are, companies like this cannot come and impose their fear tactics and say, hey, these are your risks. No, you know better what your risks are. This is why you need trusted partners and not these gray area companies who basically lose their trust in their first email. Security is all about trust. Um, Times like this come when there is bias. So every company will have biases when you approach them. There's stuff like open source software. Like I was always a proponent of open DNS for securing the DNS layer, and then they happen to be bought by Cisco, and then now they're a Cisco-owned company. Same with Duo. I used to use Duo from MFA before they were acquired by Cisco. So there's a fine line between there are some vendors that will push their products simply because we're resellers, like we are resellers with Cisco. So we have this inherent bias towards a certain product. But we, as a security practitioner, try to be vendor agnostic and neutral and open. But know that there's always going to be some reason, some bias, and we're very open with that. So yes, we are Cisco partners. We're Microsoft partners too. We're a whole bunch of others. Like with email security, we're partners with Proofpoint, Cisco, FortiMail, Microsoft, Google, Darktrace. They all do email security. We're partners with all of them. But based on your requirements, based on your existing maybe relationships or product purchases, discounts, all those things come into play when we make a decision. And it's not just a sale. I'm at least myself, I'm not interested in sales tactics. The sales guys are, but I'm interested in securing and providing proper advice, because the last thing in this list is trust. This is what we're after to gain that trust. Next question is around what do you see as the biggest missteps in 2020, with the majority of workforce shifting to work from home? I see slow adaptation to rapid change. The stuff like embracing VPNs. This should have been done a long time ago. Cloud-based solutions. People still resist the cloud. Utilize video technology. Multi-factor authentication, that's a huge one. These are easy steps, and I feel these should be done in a very short period of time. The other thing is not fully utilizing technology for productivity. Things like WebEx, cloud storage, collaboration, BYOD. There's a lot of productivity in technology like this. Use it to its full potential. And assigning security as a responsibility of the IT department, that's wrong. It's the responsibility of everyone. It's a shared responsibility to safeguard everyone's data. Next question was around what was the one common security mistake that people were making this year? Well, there wasn't one. So I answered previously the few that I thought were relevant. With the multiple security threats that are out there, what do you feel is the biggest security threat? I would say lack of awareness and desensitization. People are not aware of a lot of these threats, or they don't care about these security threats. And it all starts there. If you don't know about it or you don't care about it, that's your first weakness. And hackers are going to exploit that. And then desensitization. Every day we hear about hacks. Every week there's a news article about someone got hacked. And then we get desensitized. Yeah, everyone's getting hacked. So what? They're still doing business. They're still up and running. Uh, that's damaging security, unfortunately. So we've got to look kind of beyond that. How can we go from standard Office 365 to a NIST compliant version of this? That's an easy answer. You go to compliance.microsoft.com, and there's a compliance manager there that will walk you through some of the checklists internally in order for you to be compliant, to be NIST compliant with your current installation. It'll give you scores and stuff like this. Not only NIST, it'll tell you scores and ratings with ISO standards and GDPR and everything else. So that's a good starting point as a self-assessment. But if you want to dive deeper into this, reach out to us, and we have a full Microsoft practice here and a security practice. We can guide you through how to become compliant and how to implement some of the gaps that you may see as part of this Microsoft's compliance manager. Getting teachers and staff to take security seriously is difficult. Yes, I agree. Often they will associate school credentials as not important, not like my bank account login, etc. How do we get them to understand the gravity of their login credentials to different sites, whether education or not? I struggle with this as well, so it's not uncommon to hear this. People just don't take it seriously, but my approach to this is let's look at some of the breaches. Let's look at the example, the damage that it has done. And what we see is password recycling. So let's look at the Edmodo breach. HaveIBeenPwned.com has a description about Edmodo, which was an education platform which had credentials of 77 million records were there, so 44 million unique customer emails. And these were school teachers and administration and stuff like that, everything related to school and education, basically. All these records were breached by them as a third party. What was breached? Email addresses, passwords, usernames. And these were then used to send out phishing campaigns, spam messages. It just increased this attack surface almost immediately. Schools were breached. So there was a data breach that exposed 53,000 records of the Naperville School District. And this was earlier, this was last year actually. And again, these are local examples of how this breach happened. Now this data is out in the public. And according to this breach, it wasn't the school that directly got hacked. It was their provider, Pearson Clinical Assessment, who used one of their systems that got breached. But guess who took the rap? In the headlines, you don't see Pearson Clinical's name. You see Illinois' name and then Naperville School District's name. So it's a matter of reputation damage. So it's not just emails and data getting breached, it's also your reputation that's irreversible. So a privacy breach is irreversible because the data you get out of it, your date of birth, some data breaches have social security numbers, your passwords that are recycled. Some of those things like PII, you cannot reverse that. So it's irreversible. That's the damage that's being done. And then the lack of concern of these individuals affects the privacy of not just them, but the students, their parents. Like if my kids' schools were hacked and my information was there as a parent, my address, my phone numbers, my emails, I'd be pissed because I'd be going back to the school and saying, listen, you guys can take care of your own privacy and security. You need to do something about it. So you're not just affecting yourself. Fine, you don't care about your own privacy, security, that's fine, but care about the privacy and security of millions of other people who are being affected due to your lack of concern. So there's many approaches you can take to this. And as a school admin, you got to enforce it. If people are not convinced that I should have MFA, you know what? I don't care. It's not about you. It's about everyone else. Enforce it. enforce stronger passwords, enforce MFA, enforce offsite data and backups and all those things. These are policies. You are guardians of that information. You are given that authority, responsibility. Take it seriously. To further build on this, here's a list of some of the breaches in the past. So I showed you the Edmodo breach, which had even phone numbers in them. But then there's the Naperville breach, another embarrassment. But the last two here, so Niles West got hacked last week, and students were without email access, and according to them, it affected their lives. So if someone's still not convinced, how can it's not my breach, it's someone else's whatever data or my passwords are secure. Yeah, but students, according to this breach, had obscene emails delivered to students and parents' accounts. Another chain of emails, another article talks about racist slurs, anti-Semitic, homophobic, all these types of emails went out. This is serious stuff. This is embarrassing stuff. And this is all because a system got breached. There's no blame here because some of these systems got breached by third-party vendors. But at the end of the day, they're all getting affected. There's explicit images that were sent to parents and stuff. And those are some of the ramifications that you get. This past weekend, just a few days ago, District 211 reported a breach. That's the Palatine-Schaumburg area. And calls were sent out, robocalls, text messages, graphic nudity was sent to some family members because of this breach. So according to their official statement, and I believe the FBI got involved in this as well, they said the data was secure. Yeah, good. The data was secure, but what about all this other damage that had already been caused? This is irreversible damage. So we can talk about this all day, all the time, but every time I do a presentation like this, there's some recent data breach that I talk about. Again, some people are getting desensitized to this, but we need to take action just to stop or minimize the damages here. And I always mention this slide that don't look at the costs. The cost alone is meaningless because there's monetary theft and stuff, but then there's all these other fees and lawsuits and identity theft and long-term damages that are part of that loss discussion. It's not just monetary loss. Kim, how are we doing on time?
We are right at the noon mark, so I don't know what direction you wanted to take right now.
Did we have 1 hour for this? Remind me.
We had exactly 1 hour.
Okay. Right. So let me speed this up a little bit. I have a couple of more slides and I guess one more question, and then I'll give me 10 more minutes and I'll wrap up. So the last question here is, what will be the largest mitigation opportunity for 2021, in your opinion? I say have a security program manager, because clearly we have seen that security is complex. It's a big deal, and security controls are in place, but they're not being managed. Have a virtual CISO. If you can't have a full-time CISO, have a virtual CISO in place to at least manage some of those security complications, and then measure the financial risk. Those metrics need to be measured. So building on 2020, moving forward, what should we do? I say talk less about products, more about strategy. We need to hammer in on this more because we clearly have way too many products out there, but way too little strategy discussions. Let's have more on that so that we actually take some action and do it efficiently. All the products in the world are not going to solve your problems if they're not being used efficiently. Focus more on privacy. We've noticed breach after breach. Security holes will exist. You can't patch all of them, but the damage that is done is on the privacy side. So let's kind of look more on how to protect privacy when the breach happens, not if the breach happens. And the best solution to this is don't take it on yourself. Have security as a service. We're already using email as a service, storage as a service, platform, all these things. Why not security as a service? We actually are using it on MFA and all those things. So, and this is where our the vCISO offering comes into play. So we realize this gap in the market, and we want to fill this gap where we see this a huge benefit in having a service like this. A quick analysis of a vCISO benefit shows that a lot of organizations are struggling to answer basic questions like, what should I be doing for security? We have budget, we have security controls in place, but how do we really implement it right? And a CISO is usually the guy who answers questions like this, but a CISO costs somewhere between $250,000 to $350,000. So only the really large enterprises can afford CISOs. But this is where vCISO comes in, which costs a fraction of this. And you'll be surprised to see how affordable a solution like this is. Primarily, vCISOs were only for enterprises, but now it's going down to the SME level. And there's very low turnover in a virtual CISO environment because there's no burnout, because there's a pool of CISOs. It's no longer your headache. It's the outsourcing companies, like whoever you're renting, quote unquote, the CISO from. And it's basically a program manager in-house with all the resources available to you. So let's say I'm the VC, so I will have resources for implementation available on hand. We'll have local staff who can do some of the implementation stuff. We'll have partner networks to come in and patch in some of those gaps. We'll have advice from multiple people. So it's no longer your headache to struggle and go out and hunt for answers. You'll have one central point of authority to do that for you. And we've made it easier. We've built a tiered system. You can start off with, identify tier, just identify what where your gaps lie. When you climb up the maturity cycle, you can go under more on the develop side of things, where you're building your security posture up. And once it's more mature, you're doing all the things that security requires, like pen testing, phishing attacks, code reviews, remediations, policy building. All of that is going to be part of the managed piece of this. So it's not like one size fits all. There's multiple tiers to that. So what we offer as part of today to get you guys started is a free impact analysis. What is an impact analysis? It's a basic a score reporting strategy that we use, which will assess your digital risk. And it's based on industry averages. It's not going to be very granular on every single control that you have, but it's going to take into account stuff like your cyber insurance. How much risk are you willing to take? How much risk is the company going to take in terms of dollar amounts? You see a little screenshot here. We can go deeper into a full-on NIST sort of controls mapping, where we actually map stuff deeper. But an impact analysis, what you get out of this from today's session is a score like this. So you'll get a chart like this which says, hey, your PII breach impact, if your PII gets breached, here's the impact. It's like $250,000 in this sample example. But your ransomware impact, if you get hit by ransomware, it's minuscule here. So if you're focusing on ransomware right now in your company, putting all your dollars here, maybe you should put it in PII breach or denial of service or digital fraud or whatever. So this will give you that direction from a financial perspective, and it'll help you make decisions better. There'll be a breakdown on the dollar amount as well. So this is something we offer today. And please reach out to myself or anyone on my team to get you started with something like this. The end goal is this, and I'll end with this, that this is what security should look like from a project planning perspective. What you see on the screen here is a 2-year screenshot of what the vCISO does in your environment. Manages, your security assessments, your remediations, vulnerability scans, policy documents, IRP. You need to eventually develop and manage all of this. So if this is too much work, and half the time, I've read statistics where it says 40 to 50% of the time the IT and security folks spend are in certifications, compliance, accreditations, and research. Who's protecting your network then when you have to do all of this? So this is where we come in and offer you this service. If you want to know more about this, reach out. We will have a one-on-one session on this, but definitely reach out to us for the free impact analysis. At least you'll get the ball rolling on that. You see all these deliverables that are also part of this. These can all be ad hoc services, but if you're going to do this eventually, do this as a packaged managed security services offering or a vCISO offering, and you'll skip all the hassles of doing it yourself. And when you see the benefits, the cost benefit analysis, you'll know that this is way better than ad hoc services. That's all I had for today. Thank you very much. I went a little bit over time, but if you have further questions, you can unmute yourself and ask away. And anyone who has to drop off, I apologize for going over time, but feel free.
We do have one question. Somebody asked earlier, do you see challenges for customers who aren't sure if they want to open their networks up to vendors' cloud-based security products?
Let me read that question. I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. Do you see challenges for customers who aren't sure if they want to open their networks to vendors' cloud-based security products?
Okay. Um, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. You have to open your networks up to a certain degree if you want integrations, if you want audits. I see challenges like this with us as well when we're coming in to do security assessments. They're opening up their entire networks for us to go through. And this is where you have all those legal documents protecting you. Don't just do it without any checks and balances in place. Have very narrow scopes in place, allowing access only to certain areas, on a need to know basis, and then have the legal documentation in place, NDAs and contracts, so that if something goes wrong, at least you have something to fall back on, especially when it comes to cloud deployments. Yeah, you're opening up APIs, ports on your firewall and stuff like that. Um, do your due diligence, and this is why we spend a lot of time on the design side of things. Because if your design is right and you're doing exactly what security requires you to do, and you're putting in those controls in place, then the implementation side becomes really easy, and it's basically following the steps from then on. But if you have that lack of understanding on the design side of things and you just implement it due to time constraints or whatever, there's more chances you're going to leave open some vulnerabilities.
All right, I think that's it.
So there's one more. It says, are Mindsight NIST compliancy programs based from Cisco services? No, they are not, because NIST is a compliance that is much wider than any one product or one vendor can handle. Every time we do NIST-based compliancy assessments, whether it's on cloud environments or on-prem environments, it is so broad and the recommendations are so vast that it is impossible for one, two, or even five, six vendors to fulfill those gaps that are identified. So it's basically a gap analysis, and we give options. So if Cisco is one of those options to fill those gaps, yeah, that'll be mentioned. But if it's not, there's going to be a whole bunch of other products and non-product based solutions out there as well. What else do I see? Yeah, I think those are all the questions I see. All right. If anyone has anything else, feel free to reach out to me via email or any of our sales executive or marketing team, and we will be more than happy to answer any further questions and get on this impact analysis as well. And we'll send you out a follow-up email for more details on that impact financial risk analysis that we're more than willing to offer as part of the attendees today. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Mishaal. Bye.
All right, take care.